Hello, you may be surprised to know this, but in fact I am not dead. And guess what? I'm back. So did you miss me? Where have I been for the last month or so? Well, all I can really say is shit happens and leave it at that. So now I return to you with yet another fine video presentation, even though this is something that I really didn't want to do, but it seems however that my input into the Anita Sarkeesian situation is once again required. Now I'm going to do something a lot different from my usual format here. I'm going to do this as a series of vignettes, each offering a different set of thoughts about recent events. I'm doing this format because up until now I've tried to do this video 3 times before, and each one has come out a jumbled mess because I didn't separate my thoughts properly, so this time segregation is the way to go. So without any further ado, let us begin. Part 1. Castles Made of Sand. So the first thing I really want to deal with is the recent situation that has arisen between a number of YouTubers who I all kinda still like. So the main issue is that recent information about Sarkeesian has come to light, most of which will be posted in the description to this video, and it's the reactions to this information that have been varied across the board. To people who hate Sarkeesian, it proves her guilty of Capital One fraud. To people who love Sarkeesian, these accusations are libelous and they are threatening to sue, more or less. So now I'll get into what we can actually learn from this evidence in the next section. There is however here a different can of worms. Recently her supporters have grown increasingly vocal in stating how everyone who's ever raised a point against Sarkeesian, including myself, is indeed sexist and that they have no points against what Sarkeesian is saying. This is funny to me for a reason I'll get to in a little while. So what I want to do is very broadly point out that my original video on the topic still stands. In fact, it stands stronger than ever. The fact that the quote-unquote criticism from Anita supporters has been so pathetic to say the least is a nice testament to this. The fact that not a single one of my detractors has managed to bring up a point against me that is not a straw man or otherwise complete crap and not addressing a single thing I said in the video is also something I consider achievement. Why? Because in academic realms though, Anita is just indefensible. Her entire argument is based on nothing but her own opinion. She presents no sources, presents no research, presents no standard of evidence, absolutely nothing. I didn't need to discredit her. I want to point this out. She had no credit to begin with. She's not an authority on video games, she's not part of the industry. All I was doing is pointing out a lack of evidence and lack of relevant authority in a field which she claims to be an expert in and which her supporters paint her as an expert in. So really, there are 2 broad points that I want to make about people defending Sarkeesian and or Anita's logic. The first point is something that every primary schooler should know: the burden of proof. This is why people complaining about my quote-unquote side of the quote-unquote debate not having any points to prove is quite funny to me. You see, we, for lack of a better term, do not need to find reasons to disbelieve Sarkeesian. She needs to give everybody with a functioning brain a reason to believe her. So if you claim that the quote-unquote evidence against her is quote-unquote lacking, it is a completely pointless observation because the evidence in support of her position is non-existent. Any proof in the negative of her is just the cherry on top. It's just a bonus, but it doesn't need to be there to disprove her. She's already disproved herself by not citing any sources or citing any information on this, just giving her opinion and her observations based on nothing. The second point about Anita is that not only does she not have any proof for her statements, she has many arguments that are presuppositional in nature. What this basically means is that she expects her audience and everybody who watches the videos to accept certain concepts, definitions, etc. as already being decided in the way that she wants them. For example, she'll show you a video with a picture of a quote-unquote sexualized female and assume that the audience will find this as a negative with no further explanation given. A woman acting sexual is by default bad. Of course, presuppositional apologetics like this, which might I add were invented by Christians such as Dr. William Lane Craig to defend God, because let's presuppose God created the world and that the only source of truth is the Bible. That is typically what they say, and like Anita, let's presuppose that feminist theory is the only correct theory and then move from there, exact same way. These things are not logically sound because they have no way to question the precepts upon which a particular argument is made, and they also give the person who employs this tactic an incredibly large advantage because you've already had to cede all these points to them. before you've even begun the debate. So this is a common feature I saw on the Atheism Plus forums, where any arguments against the presuppositions of the forum members would get you basically instantly banned. So yes, we're dealing with a logic on the level of Atheism Plus. Wonderful. Now both of these features I have seen before in the religious and occasionally the feminist debates, where someone, usually God's word, is going to be held as the truth, and prove God doesn't exist is a very common argument, and it's being employed here by her supporters in the exact same way that it is done by the radical Christians in those debates. These are both serious logical flaws in both Anita and her supporters' logic. I just thought I should mention them. Both of these flaws are why I have such a hearty chortle when I hear anyone comparing everyone who spoke out against Anita to the Westboro Baptist Church. Yes, that is irony on a tremendous scale. Part 2. Sell, sell, sell. So next up, I'll just state what I've drawn from the evidence that has been presented to me thus far. Let's just start out with the fact: Anita is not a gamer. She has no respect for the medium. She thinks that the medium is in and of itself sexist completely in its whole entirety. Now, unlike Anita or her supporters, I'll provide evidence to this fact. Linked down below is a video from One Flying Turkeys. It proves these statements to be true beyond any damage control or shadow of a doubt. Now, the fact that Anita hates video games and thinks that the medium is in and of itself sexist is not exactly relevant. I've always suspected this from the very start, and I've acted accordingly. I've always acted as if Anita isn't a gamer. It does serve though as a distraction from the real evidence. The real evidence, you ask? Well, what this shows is that she was able to lie to the gaming press about her background, and that none of them checked up on it. It honestly is embarrassing that a random user called, of all things, Flying Turkeys managed to find a scoop that the quote-unquote journalist could not, and that he/she is not even getting paid to do this as a job. It is really sad when an anonymous/V user is a better journalist than the industry's finest. And then there's another thing, the question of her background in sales and PR. Well, to be honest, I don't know how much use all the info really is. It doesn't really tie her to any real scams, just to internet marketing. This is important to note, but still, why would a feminist media critic have a background in these fields? Wouldn't this suggest an entirely different skill set to the one that you would need to be an expert in this sort of criticism? These are valid questions, but in short, to me, her background suggests that she's a marketing guru and PR spin doctor rather than what people seem to think she is. Now onto the illusion of power the gaming press and other media has given her. Yes, I said it, illusion of power. Because honestly, every time I hear about this huge cultural effect that Anita is having, it is not from the industry, it is typically from the journalists. They keep this great narrative going that Sarkeesian is having this huge cultural impact, when in reality it's just a bunch of empty bravado hot air. Case in point, GTA 5. It's bloodier, more outrageous, and yes, I'll say it, more misogynistic than anything ever released to date. Why? Because sex sells, violence sells, spectacle sells. Feminism, LGBTQ rights, and progressive agenda simply don't. Not in the mainstream industry. They seem to be having some success in the indie field though. The industry though will keep on going as it is. I can't see games changing to meet these minority tastes anytime soon. At least not the mainstream industry. And hey, if I'm wrong and she actually has this huge impact and all these game companies start accepting her criticism and making games to her specifications, then may the reduced sales and the crashing of the entire industry be a lesson to those people. So, barring an entire law on her side, an entire law passed by Congress to say video games should be censored in the following ways, I wouldn't worry about Anita ruining the video game industry anytime soon. They're doing a good enough job of that themselves. I think the most important lesson here is that the gaming press are the least trustworthy, biased, dishonest and manipulative group of jackals on the face of the planet. This is why I see fit to expose and deconstruct them on my channel on a regular basis, if that wasn't obvious by now. Anyway, enough of that, let's move on to the next section. Section 3. truth burns. Now I don't mind mentioning this next person's name because they are indeed a friend of mine. The Bad Cop 69 recently uploaded a video saying how he doesn't think that this discussion of Anita's merit or lack thereof is worth it, and really I'm very disappointed in him for this. Disappointed that he didn't realize that sooner. You see, facts, evidence, truth, these things were never a part of the discussion here from the very beginning. I've actually known this for quite some time, which is why I decided to cancel my entire series of videos on Anita. You see, really at the end of the day, each video would be the same because I have one main point. The burden of proof is on her. She needs to back her broad assertions or be considered a joke. This is really at the core of what I'm saying. The fact that people are willing to take things on faith if they are presented in a non-offensive enough manner, and also a quote-unquote reasonable enough manner, is something which I find personally depressing. People who think this way are the sole reason that our world is in the sorry state that it is, because they believe anything anyone tells them. You see, we're dealing with people here who seem to believe in what Anita is saying as if it were fact. No citation needed. There is no way to win. I will never convince them. You will never convince them. Their minds are as closed as Fort fucking Knox. You're not dealing with thinkers here. You're dealing with believers, and that's important to note. This is why this discussion is not going to go anywhere, because these people don't want to talk about gaming, but rather they want to talk about sexism. This is the point that almost everyone has missed. To them, sexism is everywhere because we live in a 1950s as patriarchal structure, so why wouldn't it be inherent in video games? In other words, confirmation bias is on high heat here. People are only seeing what they want to see. A handful of negative comments from gamers will reinforce what they already think about gamers, and they don't need to look any further. Cherry-picked examples will suffice, and they don't want to look any further because if they do, their entire worldview might just be proven wrong. This is why all arguments or discussion here are going to be completely one-sided. You're dealing with people who treat their politics like a religion. There is simply no winning here. I hate to be the person to tell you that. Next section. Section 4. Coda. So my final summation is as follows. Number 1. The burden of proof has still not been mollified. Please try harder next time, guys. Number 2. There is no point in arguing against Anita or her fans. They will not listen to you. As simple as that. Number 3, this is all about sexism rather than video games. In fact, games are only tangential to the message. Number 4, unless you already agree with Anita, your points against her are pretty much going to be ignored by everyone on that side of the fence, and of course the gaming journalists too. Number 5, if you're going to blame anyone, then blame gaming journalists for giving her this much of a fucking soapbox. Number 6, finally, and this is the most important point, I can't be fucked wasting my time with her anymore. Conclusion. So, that's it. For the next couple of videos, I will be taking a small diversion to deal with an institute that purports to teach manliness, or at least quote-unquote social competence. We will examine their evidence slightly more closely and see if the doggy has bite to match its bark. After that, of course, there's a never-ending tide of biased, unprofessional, unjournalistic crap that drifts across my desk, and that of course needs to be addressed. As a final word, I'd like to shout out 2 of my accomplices and comrades in the struggle for truth, Homer and the Bad Cop 69. Both of their channels are linked down below. Go and say hi from me. So there we are. I want to thank all of you people for bringing me in this channel so far. I couldn't have done it without you. I'm just well and truly sick of this topic by now. Thank you all for subscribing. My name has been Dangerous Analysis. See you all later, and as always,
good night and good luck.